Well, hello, Robert Berjon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's good to see you.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah. Well, as we were chatting off camera, we haven't. Well, you say that we've met in the intervening years between HTML5 and that when that was released, but that was the last time I remember
Yeah, I mean, you
chatting to
might you
you.
might be right. You might be right.
Yeah. I mean, I mean. We were at the point where we needed to fight for HTML5 and you just fucked off. So, and lived your life. I don't blame you. Um, and I don't think it was a wrong mover either. I think that the way it has worked out with HTML, it's fine by me.
Yeah, and the fight never ends, right? And there's that you might move on from one and then just like fall into the next one, right?
Yeah. And by the look of what I've seen or sound of it, and I see your output on social media and I've read some of your articles and it sounds like you're in a much more interesting space than, well, a different space, put it that way.
Different. Yeah, different.
Yeah, definitely different. Now, so after HTML5 was published, you what happened then for you? Because I know you went over to the States.
Yeah, I mean, so like after we shipped 5.0, I stuck around a bit at W3C for I forget a year-ish.
You weren't actually working there though, were you?
Yeah, I was. I
Oh,
was.
I didn't realize you were a worker. I would have treated you
Yeah.
differently.
When I was working on HTML5, I was in the employ of I mean, like as a contractor, but like
Yeah, yeah.
in the employ of W2C, officially representing, no one like just like working for the common good of the group as it were. Um, what after I forget like that, I'm getting old and my memory is not as good as it used to be, but I think we shipped something in November and I stayed with W3C until the end of July the following year.
Oh, okay.
And most of that work was around lots of infrastructure work, lots of like working on the test suite, web platform tests.
Yeah.
Like was we really doubled down on that for a while. And yeah, all the spec publishing tools that we've been working on for a while, like
Right.
productizing them and like
Yeah.
making them work better. So that there was quite a fair amount of like basically like technical work. And then I so
Weren't you
then
working on the Ruby spec as well at one point?
um I worked on the Ruby spec, but that was folded into HTML5 and then later it was pulled out again. I mean, like the Ruby feature is probably like the most like I don't know. I don't even know where it is now, but that thing was a
No.
promise. It was a promise for like 20 years that was basically never delivered on. And Japanese people just have to live without, Ruby, I guess, which really sucks.
Well, that's
Um,
unfortunate.
yeah, it is unfortunate. Um, but yeah, no, after that, I spent, just like to make it short, like I spent 2 years at a startup in New York working on trying to make scholarly publishing less bad. Basically like move out of the world of like four or five monopolies, oligopoly, just pushing out PDFs to people and charging crazy amounts. It didn't really work out, even though we did build some cool stuff. Then spent 5 years at the New York Times, mostly working on privacy and protecting the media from the platforms. Um, then I went to Protocol Labs to do some more tech work on decentralized protocols in general, lots of IPFS work. And now, as of 2 years ago, I'm back in Europe. I live in Brussels now, and I run my own small business, mostly working on, how to bring democracy to the internet.
So most of your work is funded by.
It's a mix. It's a mix. So I work in part for the IPFS Foundation. Um, and the primary, I mean, I do a bunch of stuff for them because like there's lots of interesting things happening in sort of like a new generation of decentralized protocols. But like a lot of what I work on for the IPFS Foundation is a set of small specs called Dazzle. I think you'd like it because it's all stupid puns. So like the specs are called Dazzle. The website is dazzle.ing, so it's dazzling. Um, and like there's a version of Dazzle for like big data, so it's Big Dazzle, so it's Bedazzle. The
So
metadata.
what does it actually do?
Let me run with the jokes a bit. So
Oh, sorry.
there's drizzle, there's like there's mazzle. I mean, like, but like what it does is
Do you
essentially
have Jizzle yet?
not yet, but like
Oh,
we could work on it.
yeah.
We basically it's a set of primitives for content addressed systems. So systems where you find content based on some kind of hash of the content itself. Which is something that's very useful for all kinds of decentralized systems, and it's particularly useful if you want to do things that broadly known as self-certifying data structures. And so self-certifying data structures for people who are less familiar with it is basically data where like if you get the data, it doesn't matter if you get it from me or if you get it from someone else indirectly through some untrustworthy channel, you can still know it came from me because it's in a canonical format. You have the
Okay.
hash of the thing, it's signed, and so basically you have all the proof. And this is very useful as a building block for other protocols. And so, for instance, one of the primary use cases for Dazzle is it's actually the core building blocks of the AT Proto protocol. So the atmosphere that powers Blue Sky and all these things. Um,
Yeah, I was going to ask you because did see you went to Atmospheres and or Atmosphere, the conference, and I
yep.
had no idea what Atmosphere was and no idea what the conference was about, but it looked interesting and it pricked my ears up in regards to it because I saw it. And then of late I have moved from B Sky to Eurosky, and now
Excellent choice.
yeah, and I've just started using mu.com as a
Dot social. Yeah, Mu. Yeah.
yeah, Moo. Yeah. Moo as a client because I like using the web client anyway. So I don't know. Is there an app? I don't know.
There's
But
no app. There will be an app. There will be an app this summer, but like right now, it's only web.
that's fine. I've always used the web where unless like LinkedIn is just really getting on my tugging at my cojones, so to speak, because it just forces you and tries to funnel you in through creating crappy interfaces into using, well, what can only be described as a less crappy interface. But they do it on purpose. They put up this, you know, dialogues and banners and things that just basically say, please, go, or not even please, they just force you to use the app. I don't like that. So I'm perfectly happy to continue to use the web app. Now, one thing I wanted to know, it's great to see these European initiatives occurring. What is the funding model for something like Moo and Eurosky? Because I
That,
don't want it to go away.
yeah, well, the plan is not for them to go away, right? Um,
Yeah,
so there's multiple things, right? It's sort of like a spectrum kind of situation. Ultimately, the goal is for all of these systems to be self-sustaining, and really, we want to transition the social media space, but more broadly, the rest of the internet. But let's start with just social media, um, to a model that I would say is more economically sensible and more democratic. The idea being like if you look at how all these massive companies currently do it, all the incumbents, they own the stack vertically, right? It's like they own all the infrastructure all the way up to the consumer product.
right.
And anyone who wants to compete is supposed to do the same thing, own identity, own privacy, own advertising, own etc., which is of course impossible. And so you have this incumbent model that's essentially build a moat around something and then charge rent and then shitify and shitify and shitify.
Yeah,
What we want to do is to split that up where you have a shared infrastructure that a whole bunch of different apps can use, competitors amongst them, and then much smaller, social apps that are all interoperable but that you can, build and operate with one, two, five, maybe 15 people, depends on what you're doing exactly, but that can keep it small precisely because you don't have to worry about the infrastructure and precisely because a lot of the value is shared. This is a model that's typical, in other sectors of industry, the more mature
right.
ones that are not like tech doing things in kind of a
Yeah,
shitty way. And so, increasingly, I mean, in Europe at least, rail is owned by an entity that only does rail. It's often like public, semi-public,
yeah,
and then you can have competing services on top. Same thing with like inter broadband access. You're gonna have like fiber. You only lay one fiber. You make it high quality. You have like some kind of shared model, and then you have competing offerings on top. So we want to bring that model to the internet. It's a long-winded way of getting back to your initial question, but the idea is Eurosky, the social media infrastructure system, is not intended to be highly profitable. It's basically
right.
just intended to meet costs plus a little bit for like rainy days or whatever you want to think about.
Yeah.
So it's an infrastructure provider. It's meant to be commodified, and the idea is to like build
So
up
it's
the
not run for profit, is that what you're
it's not
saying?
run for profit. So all of these systems are currently owned by a non-profit. And so the idea of Eurosky is really like eventually it's going to turn into probably some kind of for-profit entity, but for-profit with whatever moderation thing so that it doesn't become like, raging for profit. So probably like
Yeah.
cooperative governance, stewardship or stewardship model, something like that, where the idea is that it should be able to charge for its services, um, but not become something that will capture the ecosystem because infrastructure captures, right? So that's Eurosky. Move, for instance, could turn into like a for-profit thing because the idea is that it's an example of one of those small things run
Yeah.
on top, right? And in fact, we currently started a stream of research into new business models that work for this new universe that we want to build. So we're working with researchers who specialize in like new economics, new business models, etc. And I think one of the things that I'd love to see happen with Moo is sort of start experimenting with these things, seeing where new ways of making money can happen.
Well, hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, it's a subscription model of some versus advertiser model. I mean, I know subscription models aren't particularly popular, and I don't know how effective they are, but I mean, they do work with the. Well, every bit of software now is bloody subscription model. It tears you, yeah, it
Which
can
is
be
a bit of a problem,
frustrating.
right? Because like you end up like it adds up to huge costs that not everyone can afford.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, like, I think we tend to go back to the same set of models. I think there are more interesting models that we just need to look for. Like I saw like I don't want to say too much because they haven't like released it yet, but like I saw a new type of advertising experience provided by a small company in Norway called Kobler. And it's actually nice. It's almost like well, first it's privacy, it's fully like privacy respecting. And second, they made it so like you basically want to see the ads, which is pretty cool.
well, yeah. I mean, a well done ad is worth seeing. It's just that with the experience that that is presented to users on the web currently is that some sites are just unusable because there's so much like
Yeah.
I think like for example the independent newspaper. I like the paper. I just hate the site. So I don't tend to, I muted it in my timeline because I don't want, because every time I go there, it just frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm a Guardian reader, and I read the Guardian, and I pay them a small, you know, amount each month, and therefore I don't see ads, and I like that. I don't mind, and with my Mastodon account, I pay a small amount each month, just to keep for server or whatever maintenance for them. So, I mean, I don't think, especially if it's only a small amount, that there's anything wrong with charging. But obviously, free is better. And if you say there's advertising that won't um, take over the experience of the thing itself. I was reading in the Guardian today, and it made me think because the headline essentially was Europeans talking about digital sovereignty, but they're using the same playbook as the tech giants of the US. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, that's Max Fontane's opinion piece, which I think is
Ah, so you've seen it, yeah?
yeah. I've seen it. I know Max, and I think he's correct. I think it's i- we're basically in this situation where a lot of people didn't want to start thinking about European alternatives, and the current American government have made it, and those tech monopolies that support it directly have made it impossible to ignore the problem. Um, and so these people who have not been thinking about the issue for a very long time and now find themselves sort of like forced to look into it. The only frame of reference and the reason they weren't thinking about it before is the way that American companies operate.
Yeah,
Um, and so they thought that was fine. They thought that was innovative, and they thought they basically they were like, oh, that's how it's done. And so now oh, we've got to do the same thing here, which is absolutely useless as a perspective, right? Max is completely right in his analysis there, because like having a European Google would be just as catastrophic as having the Google we have today, right? It's bad for the
yeah,
web, it's bad for
yeah,
people. None of these companies should exist. And so that's why we're really looking at this idea of like different business models and different approaches to structuring the market. Um, and I really want to have like an approach there that's thinking in terms of market structure. A lot of like what I consider like my people, like I think your people as well, right? Have been way too naive about this over the past 30 years. It's just like, oh, we'll make it open source and everything will work
yeah,
out, right? And then, well, the bad guys get money, you don't get money, you get fucked over, right? Pretty straightforward. Um, and so yeah, thinking in terms of like business models, thinking in terms of market structure, so that we can have a different approach with a different vision and a different clear idea of how the tech ecosystem, how the digital space should work. I think is the way forward, and it's clearly what's missing in those spaces right now.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely worth giving it a try because obviously what we have, yeah, at the moment is not the best. And as you say, I mean, the political scene and the way that politics, technology, or whatever is being used to undermine European, not just Europeans, but we're talking about European. Currently, it's just uh, I just find it beyond belief, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, I don't know how we have come to this point, or how America has come to this point, because I'm definitely not there. But you know, um, one of the other things that I saw is because, as you may know, I'm part owner of a small business in the UK. We do accessibility consulting, a thriving small business to be exact. But
That's excellent to hear.
yeah, no, it's going well. We've got about 17 people working with us. Um, and one of the things is that we use Google infrastructure and Microsoft, Word, etc. And then I saw recently that there was this initiative for a European suite of office tools to. Can you tell me anything you know about that? Because
I mean, yeah, there's several that are interesting. Like in France, there's something called La Suite. In Germany, it's called Open Desk, if memory serves. And
right, yeah, yeah, I
they're kind
know.
of like different, but they're also trying to figure out how they could how they interoperate and like how maybe share backend storage and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um, it's still a little bit new, but I find that um what they've produced can sometimes be significantly better than the traditional alternatives. If you think in terms of like a LibreOffice or stuff
yeah,
like that, they're much more usable and pretty, snappy and quick. And so I definitely think there's promise in this space. I also think, to be honest, if there is a space that's really ripe for reinvention, it's office software. I
yeah.
was, for a talk I gave last week, actually, I was looking at screenshots of Office software from 30 years ago.
Right.
Apart from the fact that, the buttons are flat instead of raised, and like the gray of the UX is not quite the same shade of gray as it is today, they're exactly the fucking same thing. Um, and so I do think there's ways of using of reinventing this software. So I think those suites are interesting, and they're going to have some success. The French government already uses um, the Zoom equivalent called Visio uh,
Yeah,
extensively, and I've used it a lot. Like in a lot of meetings I've had, it's extremely smooth, like zero complaints, literally zero complaints. It's not finicky. You click the link, it opens up. You see people in the video. I don't know how to say it. It just works, right?
yeah.
Um,
I'll have to check that out. I mean, yeah. I mean, what we want to be able to do is just is use more, is use more products for our office processes that are GDPR compliant, are based in the EU, have the servers based in the EU, and things like that. And some of the stuff we do already have content, our files or whatever saved in EU servers because GDPR. So
yeah, but yeah, yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
works. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
but
just love the idea of being able to, get away from that because I was also reading today about someone because they got banned by the US government and then all of their credit cards and
yep,
everything. And I mean, the whole, it
yeah.
just seems like
Yeah.
ransomware.
This is OFAC sanctioning. So initially, it was used, to target, drug cartels, terrorist
Yeah,
organizations. The idea being that the U.S. Treasury sanctions you in such a way that not only is it that U.S. companies can no longer work with you, but like any company that wants access to American markets, notably American financial markets. Can also no longer work with you. And so it includes the euro dollar and all these systems. And they found out they sort of stumbled into the power of this thing because initially, they would just like really, again, like initially it was invented to target, like, yeah, sure, like you're a major drug trafficker and
yeah,
you're stashing away tens of millions somewhere. Well, we're going to sanction you so that, but like they noticed it was extremely effective because everything's interconnected to the point where I forget who it was, but at some point they sanctioned a Chinese person, and even in China they could not get banked because
wow,
all the Chinese banks want to have access to the international market, and
yeah,
therefore it didn't work. And so what happened more recently, I think it was a year and a half ago, is when the International Criminal Court started looking into genocide in Palestine. The judges, started working on the case as they normally would. It's their job, but the U.S. Objected to that and sanctioned the judges. And they immediately lost access to all their email because it was Microsoft. But also because it's individual. Yeah, the credit cards is Visa, MasterCard, two American
Yeah.
companies, so no credit card anymore. Of course, like no Netflix, no Amazon, no Booking.com. Like
Fucking hell.
all of these things just stopped working. Um,
And this is because you were saying that these were judges who were working on something.
Yep, they were working on the genocide in Palestine. So
Mm,
that was all they did, and it's literally their job. And they're still sanctioned, and so it's tricky because like a lot of things depend on these, pieces of infrastructure we take for granted. I mean, like your operating system is probably set up, unless you have Linux, it's probably set up to have dependencies on either Google or Microsoft or Apple,
yeah,
right? That if
yeah,
you look at phones and laptops, that's it. So those things stop working, like the App Store, the Play Store, none of that works. Yeah, I mean, the Judge Guillou, who's the French one, who's been quite outspoken about it. He's a very very interesting guy. Says it's basically like being sent back to the 90s.
mm,
Nothing technological work. I mean, he's since like, switched over to like, whatever Linux. I don't know what else like, using alternatives and all that. But like the moment the hammer comes down, it's extremely disruptive, extremely brutal. And people just don't realize how much of your life depends on that. And also just to compound things, any person who helps you can be sanctioned as well. So usually if they're not Americans, it's okay. It doesn't get too bad for them, like most of the time. But if an American helps you, they're looking at, I think he was saying 25 years.
wow,
And helping you can just like be like, if they go to the supermarket to buy a pack of beer.
yeah,
um, so you have to like tell all your American friends, like, no, like I'll don't help me. No, it's extremely disruptive and a very powerful instrument.
yeah. And it sounds like it's been weaponized to to undermine or to suppress political dissent
There's
and
a
whatever.
book about that, which happens to be right here because I was consulting it for something else, which is called Underground Empire by Farrell and Newen. Highly recommend it. They call it weaponized interdependence. So there.
Yeah. So talking of books, you've written a book, is that or is that just me voicing it?
I'm in the process of writing a book. It doesn't have a date yet.
And what's it about?
I mean, it's gonna rock and like, everyone you should like already.
Oh, of course you could have a picture of me in it, then obviously, yeah.
Um, it's the working title is called Regime Change. And the premise is simple. It explains that the entire digital space, or close to the entire digital space, is currently under the private government of a small number of companies. And I explained the notion of private government. It's a notion that pre-exists and is already used. And the book is very solution focused. So I spend just one chapter explaining why that's problem, and then I talk about solutions that exist. So how can we think about power on the internet? Where does that power for private government come from? Comes from infrastructure. So we need to build infrastructure, and then, talk about like what are computers for? How do we mobilize them to change this? How do we change everything from, search to advertising to the information environment, social media, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I mean, like I should spend more time writing it probably, but like
Yeah, well, I'm sure that you'll get to it eventually. It's interesting because that term regime change, which your book, I actually used that term in a post the other day because
yeah.
I was just talking to someone a friend who I met for coffee, and and he was talking about going over to the States, and I said, I I won't go over to the US until there is regime change, and but then I did this article about the correct way to identify a fascist using ARIA attributes and the incorrect way. And obviously it was a, picture of Trump And yeah, it just made me realize that there is a good reason why, because even though I am a white male, blah, 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 I still fear getting stuck in the American penal system or the custom system or whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
And also, it's a fucking ugly place to go. I'm at this point in time, there's just so much. Yeah. I mean, do you still travel to the States?
Not at all, not at all. I have not been to the States since Trump got elected, and I don't plan to.
Yeah.
I've already been in some degree of moderate trouble with the American immigration.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, at the best of times, they can already be like quite
Yes.
let's say finicky,
Yes.
as a nice word for it. Um, and so I'm definitely not going to roll that dice. Uh,
No. Well, exactly that. I just don't think it's worth it. Like, there's
not
this
with it.
conference that happens every year called CSUN. I've
Yep.
been there many times. I love going. I didn't go this year because, yeah, I just didn't feel it was a good idea.
And I mean, like, yeah, the odds are you probably wouldn't get picked up, but you do work in accessibility, and accessibility is like completely against what they
Yeah,
do, right?
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a bunch of like eugenics happy, fascists.
Yeah.
They're not gonna like you.
No. Well, no. I mean, all they need to do is look at my social media timeline, and they'll probably have me in a dark cell somewhere. But this atmosphere conference that you were at, that was in Canada.
Vancouver. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The last year it was in Seattle, and they moved it to Vancouver so that more people could come because they knew that a lot of their audience simply would not travel to the US.
Yeah. No, it's understandable. I mean, I traditionally also, well, whenever I can, I go to a conference in Toronto called Accessibility. I really enjoy accessibility conference, obviously, but I really enjoy going there. So I'm going to go there instead of going to, I
Yeah.
miss my trip to Seaside. And of course, um, TPAC is in Dublin this year. So,
Oh, I didn't know that. Well,
yeah.
that's easy enough.
So are you still involved in the W3C at all?
No, I no, I don't, there really isn't much there really isn't much that I have a reason to work on in the W3C space these days. The last stuff I did was mostly privacy focused, and I've been trying to wrap that up as much as possible. Once every few months, I pop into the GPC work that the privacy working group is doing, because I used to be an editor and like I was part of the initial group that started it. So occasionally it helps, but like that's pretty much it. Um, I really think that the WPC has sort of failed to renew its scope. It's very much focused on, I mean, it's entirely focused on like browser engine features and not at
Yeah.
all on the rest of the web. And the rest of the web is much bigger, much more complex, and it's where the most of the real problems are.
So you're saying that I mean, they're not facilitating, not promoting the sort of work you're talking about. They
Yeah,
just,
yeah, they're not interested too. Like when I was on the board, I tried to push for it, and there was interest in the community. There was interest from the CEO who just left, who the board hired and who just stepped down, Seth, who was excellent, sadly. But I mean, most of the community, of like companies are disengaged from the main of W3C because they're like, well, it's just like Google and Apple calling the shots anyway. So why show up? And there's areas where it still makes sense. So accessibility is one.
yeah.
So like if you're
Yeah, I think that's one of the success stories, continuing success stories of
it is it and but it's one of very, very few success
yeah.
stories, right? So there's accessibility and like the accessibility
CSS work,
companies. Sorry.
the CSS work.
Yeah, CSS is but you know CSS is kind of like okay, now we have like a lot of features.
Yeah,
You know, at some point, you know, do we really need like a seventh type of gradient, etc., etc. Like,
sure.
you know, not to disrespect the work because I think it was important to get it right, but what are you changing about the world that's critical when you improve CSS, right? Um, and I think not much. It's hard to see the relevance of major, you know, at least the major relevance of CSS work. Accessibility is still meaningful. A lot of the semantic web stuff, like, you know, has
Yeah,
like not very little adoption. And so you look at the web and you're like, well, the funding model for the whole thing's broken. Um, Social media's broken. Search is broken. Like there's a ton of stuff that's really broken out there. And W3C is just like, the web, you know, maybe that's someone else's problem. I don't know. Um, so yeah, it doesn't feel like personally, if it were up to me, I would move the accessibility community somewhere else because I it feels risky to keep it in a dying organization. And it's always better to move when you can decide to move rather than when you're like sort of like, oh shit, we need to move now.
the last people standing.
I think
Yeah,
CSS can go
well,
to the working group at this point. You know, it's fine. Um,
yeah. But it's interesting because I was talking to Brian Cardell
hmm
recently, and he was saying the well, he was ruminating about W3C and what WG, and he was saying that what WG needs is more members. But yeah, the thing is that I think that they got their sweet spot where they like it, whereas basically the browsers, rule everything.
Yeah,
I mean, they do take, it has got better. They do take input on stuff. I mean, I think it's also, I mean, it's partially because the people that we or I was dealing with, you were dealing with, that were involved in the development were just out of their teens, some of them, and I think they've grown up a bit, and so it's just as I have. So I'm a lot more sanguine and reasonable about things than I used to be. But and so are they. But I mean, it's still one of the things about find about standards is they just take forever.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Shit
I, I
takes time.
I mean, I think we should really be rethinking how we do standards on the web in general, like taking a step back and going like, okay, as you say, like what working group used to have some really serious problems. I see those problems as having mostly been addressed. The balance of power isn't there, but like it's very technical focused. Like, and it's good to have a space that's like it's focused on the tech. They're really just doing that one thing. Like people like Anna Van Kesteren are now like very
Yeah,
pleasant to work with. You know, the when you want to bring something to them, the expectations are exacting, but they're the same for everyone.
yeah,
You know, it's fair. So I would be fine with like taking, you know, all the web API stuff and the CSS stuff and just like moving it to the working group and saying, this is where the browser engine gets made, right? This is the
yeah,
core engine thing. Just leave it there, like people talking about like all those like extremely nerdy, highly specialized things together. They have a space, it's good. The question is then, what do you do with the actual web? Like
yeah,
and so on the website, I tend to put accessibility much more on the website because it touches so much on user interface and on the
yeah.
user side of things, and it's a lot less about like micro timings and like when which
Yes.
thread yields to what other thread, right?
Well,
Um, and I
yeah,
don't feel that that's being served well by W3C and none of the but at least it's in there. Um, Internationalization is like it's still like they have like very good people, but it's like two people and
yeah,
no broad support, and then all the other things that are structural to the web are just not being addressed by anyone. There's no group, and so I think we need something. It's fine to have something that's very core, like yeah, web engines. You do web
Yeah.
engines, right? Um, but like we need something for the broader picture that's much more about like governance, people, the more complex features that are less technical and much more human. We don't have that.
So, I mean, there is some trying to defend the W3C now. Um, well, I'm still involved, and I've been working with two guys from the Dutch government. One guy called Hidi de Vries and another called Jeroen Hulscher, and we've been working on this WCAG evaluation methodology.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, it was a document note that was developed by Shardy and another guy, Eric Bellman, in 2014. And if you look at the document, it looks like 2014,
Yeah.
and what we've essentially done, I mean, the bones were good, but also we've had this move towards WCAG being used in Europe and other countries to test more than web sites, web
Yeah.
apps. We're talking about native mobile apps, things like that. And I know there's pushback from um, certain companies within the W3C that don't like that idea. Um, but and so when these things come up about sort of making WCAG more tech agnostic, expanding the scope of it to fit into the reality of how it's being used, we get the pushback. So anyway, and that is a discussion that is continuing within
You're
the
not defending W2C very well.
no. Well, I'm saying, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what we've done with the WCAG EM is really meet that reality through the back door. We talk about, because a note is not a normative document, but we talk about, and we provide references and we point out that the WCAG is used for all these things. So this is how this is an evaluation methodology that you can use for multiple things, which I think is an improvement, but also looks better.
And that matters.
It does. Well, I mean, it just,
Yeah.
trying to read something like it's like like you chewing cardboard, you don't want to do. We tried to make it a bit more sort of, make the important stuff stand out more,
Yeah.
give it some nice graphics, and just updating to the latest, spec style is a help.
Yeah,
So,
and also you gotta support the people, doing advocacy out there. I can imagine some kid in a company saying like, "Oh, we should use this to evaluate our stuff," and then showing it to their boss.
yeah.
Like, what the fuck is that thing by
Yeah,
Isaac?
exactly, exactly. Well, the funny thing is that the way HEGM is used by the Dutch government as part of their methodology, and these
That's it.
two guys, they're the accessibility monitors or whatever they do. They're very. But the reason why I mentioned Hidi because he talks a lot about sustainable, um, sustainable, web, and sustainable accessibility as well. But I think he's worked on and as part of a document that has been published recently on sustainable practices.
Cool.
Also, AAI stuff that is interesting because there was a paper that came out from W3C again, or note or whatever, about the ethical use of AI.
Right.
So, what is your take on AI and what, you know, is it redeemable as a technology?
Yeah, I mean, let me crack open a beer because that's a long one. Um, no, I think we need to be careful to distinguish the technology from the products. Um, the technology itself is capable for some users, and can has potential to actually do good and specifically to, help liberate people from exactly the kind of folks who like are currently weaponizing it, right?
Yeah,
The problem is it's being shipped in an environment in which like the almost entirety of the digital sphere is captured by a small number of companies that are
yeah,
not very nice companies, um, and that have like an entire playbook, at hand to like capture markets, capture people, keep them locked in. Um, and essentially are really using that to like shift the future of AI and of the entirety of the digital space. And so I want to distinguish the potential of LLMs from what those companies are doing. What those
sure.
companies are doing is more of the same of what they've been doing for the past, 15, 20 years. So like a lot of people who are like currently discovering that being forced to search through AI sucks, and that it's destroying publishers hadn't realized that the destroying publishers side of things is something that Google has been doing, working constantly
Right.
towards for like, easily 15 years, moving
Yeah,
stuff towards information boxes, moving stuff to app, etc., basically decreasing the reasons you would have to click out of their website. So this is just the continuation of an
yeah.
approach to business that has been persistent for a long time.
So it's
Uh,
another tool for them to, yeah, to
yeah,
manipulate people.
and so a lot of people are mad at AI, but it's more because it's causing them to realize that the system in which AI exists is really problematic because it makes it very visible, right? And yeah, they're forced to use features that suck. But that has been the case. You mentioned LinkedIn when we were talking earlier. That thing sucks, but you have to use it because it's where like all your professional contacts are. And so that
Yeah,
and if it were on an open protocol, someone would have created a LinkedIn that doesn't suck a long time ago. But like right now we can't, and we have to put up with Microsoft's atrocious user experience, just because they're in the social network there. And so again, on one side we have what is like a deeply problematic set of practices that are being applied to this new technology. The technology is not neutral. It was produced with, stolen content and a whole bunch of
yeah,
stuff, and there's a whole bunch of issues with like being ecocidal in the energy uses
yeah,
it has. However, none of these things are necessary. It's also a question of how we apply the technology. If we used everyone's content and we only used it to I don't know, cure cancer instead of using it to like compete with the people who made the content in the first place, it would
yeah,
be a very different proposal. I'm not saying that LLMs will cure cancer, to be clear.
yeah,
The way in which it's being used is
yeah. You
making
know,
that thing
I get the
problematic when it
point.
doesn't have to be. And
That's
one thing I want to say about the power that the promise I see with LLMs is largely around the ability of generating user interfaces on the fly, generating user experiences on the fly, and generating code. Because I really think that these could be used as essentially like a next generation touchscreen or some kind of like new interface to
yep,
computer systems that make it possible for people to access complex or poorly designed features of computers without being like stopped by bad UX design, inaccessible design, like features that people don't want to expose because they don't like those to be exposed to their users. Like there's a whole slew of things that LLMs could enable because you can generate those user interfaces from them. I think that's where the liberation potential is with them, and we need to like steer the space towards those much better products.
yeah. I got you. Um, sorry, I'll just
You're sharing a thing.
yeah. I'm not supposed to be sharing that though. But hold on. Once I start sharing, this is where everything falls apart. Up until that point, it's all good. All right.
Uh,
Can you
hey, I,
see the Rose Gallery? It's a bit of a it's becoming more and more. It's like deconstructed now. So you're going more and more. Now, first person, there's a clue in the name of the bird. Um, I always have Dave's photo on there. So, who is the first person? Have you ever seen this person before?
I have, but like I don't know. It's super pixelated on my screen. I can't like really.
His photo is pretty pixelated.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You're just making the pixels bigger at this
uh,
point.
don't worry, that is Dr. David Swallow, my good friend and a top class UX accessibility person. Still works at TPGI, well, now known as Vispero. I have him on there because he's my close friend. Talking of close friends, do you know who the next person is?
I don't believe I do.
That is Patrick Lauka. He's
Oh,
another friend
yes,
of
of
mine.
course I know Patrick.
Yeah, and Patrick is currently doing a wonderful job, bang up job at the WCAG 2 backlog because WCAG 2's got lots of technical debt. It's got thousands of documents, supporting documents to the main normative text, and all of those are just well, they many of them are stale or getting staler by the day. Pat and his merry band of people with their head screwed on go through and update those to make them more usable. And so when because WCAG, W3C WCAG documents always come up in people's searches.
Yep. Well, yeah.
So that's yeah. So and that's what Pat's working on as well as he does. He's editor and chair of the Pointer Events working group as well. He's a thoughtful chap. Um, what I was going to ask you was that we were talking about search before. What are the what alternatives to Google and are there?
I mean, there's a bunch. Like I, I again, I want to give like a multi-level answer to that question, right? If you're
That's
just
fine.
looking for a search engine like today, personally, I'm not paid to endorse them or anything, but like I use Ecosia,
Oh
ecosia.org.
yeah,
It works. I mean, like what I'm looking for in the search engine is something where you type in a query and it gives you a list of links and you can click on the links.
yeah, exactly.
It does it like really well. So I'm happy with it. I've also used DuckDuckGo quite a lot. It's pretty good. And I know a lot of people who are fans of Kagi. Uh,
Yeah, well, that's a paid for service, isn't it?
yeah.
I've been using Kagi. We've got a subscription for a few people in the company, but one of the things that Pat brought up recently was that Kagi relies on the infrastructure from the search infrastructure from Yandex.
Interesting. Well, I mean,
So yeah, I mean, it's just trying to find a something like search that it doesn't use the infrastructure of one of the major companies. I
it,
mean,
that
does it
that's
echo Asia?
that's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Ecosia and Quant are currently collaborating to build their own index, and Brave also have their own index.
Oh, Brave too.
Yeah, Brave do. Um, and so there's options that are emerging. Most of the alternative indices are not wonderful yet. It's expensive, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But they're getting there. They're getting better. What One of the reasons I like Ecosia, apart from the fact that they're a very sustainable regen business, is that they basically have so most of the a lot of the search results come from like Bing or Google, but they use the knowledge they gain from people searching to develop their own index and make it better. So you get
Oh,
this sort
cool.
of like transitional system where you're getting a blended results. You're not sure where they come from. They could come from either, but they
Yeah.
use that to develop the alternative, which I think is the pathway forward.
And where are they based?
In Germany.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's an
Well,
interesting
something to
company.
look
It's
into.
it's basically it's a for-profit that's owned by a non-profit, I think, if I remember correctly. And they reinvest their profits in like, planting trees and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah, if you've done a certain amount of searches, then they'll. Yeah,
They're planting trees. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, I like it. I think, however, that we can do better than that. Following the theme I was mentioning earlier of things that haven't changed since the 90s. Search really hasn't changed. I mean, now we're getting AI results, but like that's not what I want, right? I
no,
just give me fucking links. Um, and I
and
really
not sponsored paid links or either.
Yes, if possible, or at least if they're clearly set aside,
Yeah,
that is fine.
but
But
they don't now. That's the thing is
that,
it's all mixed up, and
I
it's just
mean,
like yeah, Google's just shit to me these days.
it's so bad. It's so once in a while, I use someone else's phone or computer, and it's Google because like they've bought up everyone, um, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is horrendous. But the thing is, like, so that I was that's actually where I was heading towards. I think we can change the way the search experience works in general. I recently published a report. It's available at ftw.fund. And it's a rather comprehensive look at the search browser market. But really, the idea is that we could have much better search experience provided by browsers or browser
Yeah,
extensions, except browsers don't want to do that because the money comes from sending you to Google.
yeah,
And so because there's a cartel of browsers and Google working together to maintain Google's monopoly, because browsers get paid more when Google makes more money. So they have a direct interest in maintaining that monopoly.
right.
Which, by the way, that money comes from defunding the rest of the web because the money that Google makes that way is money that would otherwise flow to the rest of other web services, like
Yeah, so it's
media sites and
obviously
all
a
that.
cost there, isn't it?
Um, so basically, we're in the system in which like browsers and Google are conspiring to make money by defunding the web. We could have a better system than this.
Well, I more than agree with you. Um, Next person after Pat, you probably don't know
I don't think I do.
her. Her name is Glenda Sims. She is Chief Information Accessibility Officer at DQ Systems, which is one of the big three uh, accessibility companies, tool vendors or whatever in the States. But I just recently had her on the fireside, and as you can see there, she's wearing her gift from the HTMLZ, which you also get a gift, but you just choose whatever you like, and I'll send it to you.
Ooh, sounds
So,
cool.
yeah, from HTMLZ, choose whatever you like from there. Send me the details, and then I'll send it to you because I do it through my provision provider or whatever they're called. Um, yeah, so that it was really nice to talk to Glenda. I mean, I don't see eye to eye on some things to do with because I don't like big companies. I'm fed up of working for, I worked at Vispero. That was okay, but yeah, as a whole, I don't know whether large companies are a good thing or a bad thing for accessibility in particular. I know they're not a good thing for many things, but they're not that large. I mean, they're large in terms of, the accessibility consultancies. They're not large in terms of, they're not well, they are multinationals. But anyway, moving swiftly on. This photo, I keep photos. I've got thousands of them. Um, do you recognize when this was taken?
Yeah, that's on the, I believe, if memory serves, that's at the release of HTML5
That's right.
at the Museum of Computer Museum. I forget.
Yeah, yeah, it was some computer museum. That was well, that's the last time I remember bumping into you. But that was in maybe we did see each other after that because we
I
continued to do a bit of work on the HTML.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but that was 12 years ago now.
we haven't
Well,
changed.
no, well you've still got that cheeky grin and
Oh, I'm
Tim
dying with that.
Berners-Lee,
So
Tim Berners-Lee and Leonie Watson, who's one of my co-directors at Technological. And
big,
the
big,
next
big,
shot,
big fan of Leonie. Absolutely.
yeah, Leonie's good. Um, the next shot is a black and white shot. Is that you? I thought it was you.
It's me on the left there, and Tess on
Yeah,
the other side. Yeah.
yeah, Tess. I know Tess. Yeah, but I thought I couldn't quite work out because there's somebody that looks similar to that, and it's not the best photo. It's actually a photo of all of the. Well, there was Travis. I
And
keep thinking Travis
and
Bickle, but his name's not Bickle. But Travis, the guy from Microsoft,
yeah, of
he
course. I
was
saw
there. There's others, but
Travis and Erica. I actually saw Travis um like not long ago, like 2 years ago. Um
he got out like he seemed to disappear. I'd seen.
yeah, he worked on a bunch of other things, but yeah, he's mostly focused on other stuff now. And
But
same with
Tess is
Erica.
still involved, and she's big at the W3C.
Yeah, yeah, for her sins.
Yeah, well, yeah. You made me feel like I need to wash my mouth out now when I say W3C. Not that bad. There's still some good stuff. I mean, I was involved, like I sort of got out of the accessory groups for about 10 years. After HTML5, I was just tired. And
I wonder why.
I continued on doing some of the HTML API stuff and the rules for use of ARIA. But it just, I got to the point where I got Jack of that as well, and now Scott's taken over, which is great. Okay, so that is the deconstructed rogues gallery. I can close that now. So okay, so oh God, I got my somehow sometimes it thinks that I put my hand up and
Oh,
it'll
it does gesture recognition.
I don't know how to turn it off.
Yeah, I disabled that like as fast as I could because like I I talk with
Yeah,
my hands a lot and it kept doing like, bubble, hearts,
yeah,
fireworks, whatever.
yeah.
I was
It's a
like, what the fuck is going on?
good idea to get rid of that. So so you have your own company and you're obviously contracting to. Are you doing mostly work in policy? And no,
No, I mean I I do both, right? So like for instance, the work I do for IPFS is very much technical work. It's not policy. The idea is to have a protocol that is more governable, more, open to democratic internet, but it's not policy work. Um, the work that I do for the backend protocol, for instance, is very much about governance. So it's not technical, but it's also not policy. It's more
yeah,
like how do you make a thing, how do you make the governance of the system work? Um, and then, other work I do with like folks here in Brussels or like FOTI or public AI is very much like policy oriented. So, how should we like think about these things? And then there's stuff that's sort of like a mix. So like for instance, the Eurosky work. Well, part of it is like, hey, like working with people who are like building infrastructure, like figuring out
yeah,
and to be clear, I'm not the one doing like most of the work there. It's like that there's like highly qualified people actually like making the computers run and building the things. Um, but like still working with the technical people on one side, but also talking to policymakers, talking to people about like how to like strategically make these things work. So I really try to cross the chasm between tech and policy. It really it's two spaces that have been like standing so far apart, and they really shouldn't be. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Um, so what are you optimistic about as far as the future of the web, internet, digital
Everything,
tools, everything?
everything. No,
What?
honestly, I think
Except the W3C. Everything else.
everything else. Um, no, I mean, like, we're in a weird moment when it's pretty clear to most people, and by that I include like non-technical people, that where the digital space is, like the old stuff, all the Googles and the Facebooks and all that stuff, it just isn't working. It's just not, it just fucking sucks. Like, and this is not like for technologists have known this for a while, right? But like, if in fact, I think people who are not technologists themselves almost know it better than technologists, because they're like, I use this every day and it really sucks. Whereas like people are like, oh, we added a new type of gradient to, you should
Yeah.
rejoice. Um, um, and so we're reaching a point at which like people don't know what to do next, but they want a next. And there's tremendous potential in this moment. And I really see a shift. All the work that people are doing in the atmosphere vibes so much like early web. People are realizing, oh, hang on, if you have a social protocol, it doesn't have to be used for a doom scrolling thing. You can use it for anything where like humans are in, because like social is like anything with humans.
Yeah.
You can use it to publish metadata about like cool scientific stuff. I mean, like people are starting to use it for like all kinds of crazy use cases. Um, Also, the vibe I'm getting. So, for instance, I spoke at public spaces last week, and it used to be that people were like, "Oh yeah, tech, it has problems. We need some regulation." And like people now are like, fuck that. We need money so that we can build something else because what we have is terrible. And so we're really, I think, at the very beginning of the next stage. And so I am optimistic because I really think people are starting to think about the problems in ways that lend themselves to finding solutions. People are starting to figure out that, hey, we can't just like sleepwalk and let's hope that the tech companies are nice. Um, People are moving away from regulation is important, but it's only one part of the solution. And
Yeah.
people are getting away from like, oh yeah, let's just like have a few things that'll tinker with it. Same thing, like I haven't heard I mean, it's getting really rare to hear anyone talk about tech ethics. Tech ethics is largely useless. It's just like, oh, please, can you act nice, Mr. Very Powerful? No, you need governance, you need counterpower, you need democracy, right? Um, and so, no, I think it's hard. It's uphill. We're up against some of the most powerful entities that have ever existed.
Yeah.
Um, but like the stars are aligning, the people are aligning. I think the next step is going to be great. It's gonna take a fight, but it's going to be great.
Good. Now, to finish off, I wanted to ask you, for some reason, I think that you have some association with Australia. Is that just me hallucinating?
No, it's not. I'm half Australian.
That's what I thought. I
Eh,
thought that you were. But
Sadly, I kind of lost the accent because I left 45 years ago.
yeah,
Um, And in fact, last time I went to, I can't even fake it. I can't even fake the accent, much to my shame. But last time I went to Australia, I show up at the border, pull out the Australian passport. The guy asks me like a basic question. I start answering, and I got through like maybe half the sentence. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Stop right there. Stop right there. Where did your accent go? That's not tolerable. Like next time I'm not letting you in.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have a bit of an accent, and people pick up on it. But yeah, I mean, I've been here for 18 years now, so um,
I still
okay,
hear it, but it's faint.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's there, but
Mm.
yeah, but it's subtle. Like it's me all over, Mr. Subtlety. Well, thank you, Robin. It's been really good to talk to you, and
Likewise. Yeah.
I'm just glad there are, intelligent people, smart people with a conscience